And thank you for, making the trip and presenting us with this film. I was reading, when I was doing my homework for the Q&A, I was reading an old interview of yours where you said your last film was a failure because the only people whose lives it changed lived in the Lower East Side of Manhattan or Berlin's Mitte. So do you think how do you think this film is an improvement on that failed experiment?
Yeah, the interview, I don't know which one it was, but indeed, the analysis was right, I think. And I also say it within this film. I kind of break the news to people in Lusanga that, I mean, this is the problem of critical art in general. Not all, there are certainly many exceptions to the rule, but the rule is that artists or the art world at large or the art apparatus at large extracts things that you can think about or have critical positions about, make films about in various parts of the globes or various layers of society, and then, kind of makes products out of it and distributes those products in a few very tiny areas of the world, really. Indeed, that would be the Lower East Side or Berlin Mitte or a few other areas of the world. So in a way, that's quite provincial, and it's quite extractive also. So the whole attempt within this film, or the project that, the film is just one take on, really, is to try and reverse that. And as you see in the film, it's not always working out so well. There are many... I cannot sit here? Oh, really? God.
I'll just get the chair.
The dangers one has to overcome to just simply talk about a film in New York.
This is load bearing.
It is, yes. It looks scary to me. Why don't you sit there? I'll just stand.
Absolutely. I'll get one for me as well. So
okay.
Just, yeah.
Shall I go on with answering the question?
Yeah, yes, please. I'm so sorry.
So, one of the problems with critical art is that, yes. So no, here the attempt was to make sure that maybe people who work on the very plantations, there's another linkage there, obviously, our art world or some of the institutions, key institutions within the art world have historically been financed with profits extracted from museums. Museums, from plantations. There's a wonderful book by Simon Gikandi. He's briefly in the film. You see him when he observes sculptures at Sculpture Center. So Simon Gikandi, he's a professor, he's a Kenyan, he teaches at Princeton, has written this wonderful book called Slavery and the Culture of Taste. And he makes the analysis, this is mostly about 18th, 19th century art, but it's still true today, that there is this, there are two coins of the same reality, really. You extract that is, the shareholders and owners of plantation companies, mining companies, etc., extract capital from one part of the globe and reinvest part of it in museums. Not exclusively museums, also railways and, industries. But part of it, the money that, part of that, the money is so dirty that it needs to be whitewashed, and so art is really one of the best ways of doing that. The funny thing is, when he explained all of this, Simon Gikandi, this is another story, but to Mathieu and Cédar, they went to, Mathieu is like the hero of the film, so he went to visit Simon Gikandi, and they had to talk in the Firestone Library at Princeton University. Firestone is obviously tires, and tires is rubber, and rubber is plantations. So the very institution in which Professor Gikandi explained this recently to Mathieu when they went to visit him was another, in this case, university building financed directly with the profits extracted from, in that case, rubber plantations. So here the attempt, to come back to your question, the attempt is in a very small way to try and somehow create the possibility for a community of plantation workers to also benefit from critical art. So did it really work? I mean, it's the beginning. It's only the beginning. CATBC by now has some 120 hectares. That's like, I don't know, 500 football fields or something. It's not huge compared to the real plantation companies. It's really small. But films like this, and especially the work that they make, the sculptures and other things they're working on, yeah, all the money goes into buying land, and then I try and help with fundraise, because once you have the land, it's still exhausted, depleted plantation land after 100 years of monoculture. And people really cannot live off it. You don't see children dying in this film, but a lot of children do die because they are not fed well, or not well enough anyway. And there's no money for medicine. I mean, it's a disaster zone. So anyway, buying back your land and then fundraising for people to be able to plant trees again, medicinal plants, plants that are climate change resistant, etc. That's what we are working on constantly. And art is like the engine for it in a way, not just economically, but also in terms of building a new world altogether. And I think that's kind of what art did prior to, it being looted. Not just in Congo, but I guess all over the world. It was part of building a world, and that's what we're somehow trying to do.
I mean, I remember watching this film first when we were programming, and this could be me because this is what I do, I read the whole film as a metaphor for documentaries as well. Whatever you say of art here, and we're very mindful, this is a documentary film festival, we're very mindful that those same powers or like same processes of exploitation, of making money off of people's misery, is something that's also very true of the documentary form's history as well. And when you try, what you're doing is you're not just reclaiming the power structure of the museum and the art, the art space and the museum, but you're also trying to push the documentary form a little bit. Is that something that just comes with it, or is that something that you mindfully do?
I think it's true for all the instances of power that have been created in the West, like Northwestern Europe and the United States, whether it's the university or the stock exchange or the museum or indeed probably the film industry. They are all based on extracting. All of them, every single one. They're all extractive industries. Even if maybe, the content can be really beautiful and humanist and full of love and desire to know each other. I mean, as a kid, when I went to the museum and saw artifacts from, for example, Congo, I fell in love with those objects. It's not like it did inspire love. Much like Facebook, people talk with each other, it can inspire love. It's still part of an extractive mechanism in which profits are only made at the top. And I think it's time in many, many ways to try and, I guess the word for it is to decolonize it.
Yeah. Questions from the audience? So we are not passing around mics, so if you want to just stand up, take your mask down for like a second or two. Yeah, in the last row.
Firstly, Renzo, try to project here. Firstly, Renzo, thank you so much for this film and obviously the heart space from where it seems to have come from. I appreciate that. My kind of question is that there are two questions really. One is about how you feel about the feasibility of this being sustainable as far as the sort of art, land, repair or reparations sort of aspect. How sustainable is that, or feasible is it, without a white middleman in real terms? And secondly, if it's not too personal to ask, I'd like you to articulate exactly what you were feeling when you broke down. What were the emotions? What brought this on specifically for you? I'd like to understand it. from your perspective.
Thank you.
Did everybody hear the question fine? Yes.
Oh, you want me to repeat it? Okay. So the first question is a comment about the sustainability of the project and how long it can, and if they can exist without the white middleman. Am I getting all your
Correct.
points, sir? Yes. And the second one, if it's not too personal for you, if you can talk about what were you feeling psychologically when you broke down.
Yes, thank you for those questions. The white middleman. The project certainly exists because two types of people who somehow represent the opposite ends of the global value chain come together in this project about which the film was made. So I'm, a white Northwest European guy. I'm not from Ukraine or from Moldova. I'm from a country as rich as the United States. I'm a middle class guy. I could go to art school, stuff like that. And on the other hand, a community of either present or recently present-day plantation workers or the direct descendants of those, their children. They come together in this project. We come together, and that's why it's possible. I think Mathieu probably wouldn't even have thought of building a white cube, let alone getting OMA to design it or finding the money that was needed to pay the community to not work in the fields but work on a white cube. So surely that is because I brought in those ideas. And on the other hand, none of it would have made any sense if it weren't for this community, and none of the sculptures obviously would have been made. And this was really the beginning of the sculptures. By now they're even better, I think. They're very, very good sculptures. It's becoming a real body of work. And it exists because those two forces come together. Now, you must understand that these forces continuously come together. If you put some peanut butter on your peanut butter jelly sandwich, there is certainly a middleman between you as a consumer and the people working on the peanut farms. If you drink any cup of coffee, there are loads of middlemen doing it. Many of the middlemen, especially the ones in power, are white guys. Not exclusively, but very often they are. Or the shareholders of those companies are. It's rare that these shareholders allow themselves to be filmed when they do what they do. So I in this film, took the role upon me of that white middle class guy, being the middleman, for it to be visible. I think even in the many museums that are now decolonizing and finally, opening the floor for people of color to make art, for their art to be exhibited, acquired, for curators to decide on which art should be exhibited or acquired, that they're also of color and not exclusively white men. This is fantastic. It happens in the art world, I think in much of the economic structures that, fill up our supermarkets. There is not that much diversity. So I think what the project does is bring together not just two ends of the value chain, but also two practices that are completely intertwined. It's the practice of making art and critiquing the world, understanding the world through art, and on the other hand, the commodities industries. We all eat chocolate. We all consume palm oil on a daily basis. We all drink coffees. It comes from these plantations, these and all the other ones around the world. And the people on those plantations obviously have as rich of an artistic heritage as anybody in this room. So for them for the art production, the critical positioning vis-a-vis the economy, and the economy, on the other hand, for those to come together and do some kind of a game together, what we're doing, and middlemen are part of it. Yeah.
I guess, I mean, let me reframe that question. Do you see this project ever, 5 years, 10 years, becoming independent of your contribution? I know there's been enough, like,
It
you've done a
could.
lot in its inception,
Yeah.
but do you see it growing to a point where it's independent of you?
But nothing. I'm sure it could happen, and maybe it can happen tomorrow. But it's not really important. I think.
Right.
Nothing is independent of anything else. We wouldn't be in this room. We wouldn't be dressed. Can you dress yourself independently in the next half year? No. People in Bangladesh and Mexico are working in sweatshops for 12, 14 hours a day, and that's why we are clothed. I don't know, this is probably powered by uranium. Maybe it comes from Canada, I'm not sure. If the petrol in our cars, everything comes, nothing is independent. It's about creating solidarities, not about being independent, I think.
That was the second part of the question.
Oh yeah, the second part, what I felt when I broke down. Well, I made many mistakes, and you see some of them in the film. Just being an obnoxious white guy, having too many pre-formatted ideas was just one of them. And you know, it all breaks down somehow, and then that's. I think it's the very fact that I cried was vanity in and of itself. But I thought it was funny to put it in the film. I think the film, to be honest, is also a slapstick, like a screwball comedy. I like it in that way. It's also very serious and beautiful and this and that. Some parts of it, but it's also, you know, it's a portrait of the world that we live in. A landscape would be better. Yeah. I can't take responsibility for everything in it. It's just the way I think it's kind of organized.
Yeah, I think we'll just take one more question because the lady showed me a minute. But we can take one more question.
I don't even know if it's a question. It's more of like kind of rolling off of what you just said. It was, you know, you play a character as well in this film, and I couldn't help but think of like, you know, Herzog or Fitzgerald, specifically the way you're dressed and the way you kind of behave. Do you want to talk at all about it, or am I kind of missing it altogether?
The question is, for the camera, is you play a character in this film, and there are, you know, markers of Herzog, you said?
Yeah, I was thinking of like Fitzgerald specifically. I mean, there's this kind of a character, a white man, blah,
Right.
blah, 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 blah. And I was just wondering how conscious it was, and I think it's a very important part of the film as well. So,
Like, how conscious are you of the character
No,
that you
I
play
am.
in this film?
I am conscious of the character that I am in the film. Maybe not entirely. There may be parts of it that I don't see. Certainly, I'm sure. But yeah, some other parts. I mean, obviously, when I kind of am introduced as as the white guy, I am quite literally introduced as this, you know, the white savior. Then obviously, I mean, that doesn't end up in an edit if you're not aware of it. You would really cut that part out if you didn't want it to be there. So it's there because I am somehow. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a savior, but I certainly am a white guy for sure. And it's also in this community, on these plantations, when I arrive there, or anybody else who's not black, would be seen as potentially somebody who represents power and money, or a solution. You know, any $10 in your pocket is like, you know, 2 weeks' salary. So surely you have a solution when you arrive there. So what my whole thing has been is to kind of extrapolate it and take responsibility for it. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful. Thank you.